What if Robert Baratheon betrothed Jon Snow to Myrcella Baratheon? What if a single drunken word, spoken over a cup of southern wine in a hall of the frozen north, could bend the shape of a kingdom? What if grief, dressed as a king, reached across 16 years to touch the living and rearrange them like game pieces on a board no one else could see? This is where it begins. Not with a war, not with a blade, with a whim. The feast at Winterfell burns low and warm against the cold pressing at the shutters. King Robert Baratheon sits sprawled at the high table, a mountain of a man gone soft at the middle, his goblet never empty for long. The stark hospitality flows around him, and Robert, deep in his cups, watches the yard through a frost-fogged window where the youngest of the household spar with wooden swords under a torch's light. One of them draws his eye, a dark-haired boy, lean and quick, with a long northern face and gray eyes that catch the firelight. Robert leans toward his old friend. He says the boy has the look, the Stark look, Lyanna's look, and in the saying of it, something old and buried stirs beneath the wine. Ned Stark goes very still. This is the reflex of a man who has kept a secret so long it has become part of his bones. He knows the boy. He knows what the boy is, truly, beneath the name he has given him. And he knows that any conversation touching on Lyanna and that dark-haired child at once carries a danger no one at this table can measure but him. Robert does not see the stillness. Robert sees only the past. He rises unsteadily and calls for Ned to walk with him, away from the noise, into a chamber lit by a single fire. And there, the whim takes shape and hardens into something more dangerous. Robert speaks of Lyanna, of the crown of winter roses, of the promise he made himself the day she died, that the Stark blood and the Baratheon blood would be joined, that the two houses would be bound so tightly no man could ever pull them apart again. He had thought to bind them through Sansa and his own son, but now, warmed by wine and memory, another thought arrives. "The bastard," he says. "Give the bastard my daughter. Consider the shape of this offer." Robert believes he is being generous. He believes he is lifting a low-born boy into the light, honoring a dead woman, healing an old wound with a stroke of royal will. Marriage to a princess would raise the boy toward legitimacy. It would make Lyanna's kin his kin. To Robert, it is simple. To Robert, it is love. To Ned, it is a trap with no visible walls. For the man weighs it instantly, in the way of one who has spent a lifetime measuring threats. If Jon marries Myrcella, the boy becomes a figure of interest, watched, studied, brought south into the very nest where the truth of his blood would be a torch held near dry timber. Any bastard raised so high invites scrutiny, and scrutiny is the one thing Jon Snow must never survive. Ned tries to turn the king. He speaks of the boy's low birth, of the insult it might do the queen, of 100 practical objections dressed to hide the true one. But Robert, once an idea takes root in him, is a stone rolling downhill. The more Ned resists, the more Robert loves the notion, because it feels to him like the one good thing he might do with a crown that has brought him little joy. He will not be moved. And so Ned is left with the oldest problem of his life in a new and terrible costume. Elsewhere in the castle, the word travels. It always does. A servant hears, a cupbearer repeats, and before the fire in the king's chamber has burned to embers, Cersei Lannister knows. Picture her receiving it, the cold golden stillness, the slow narrowing of the eyes. Her daughter, A princess of the blood, a Lannister and a Baratheon both, pledged to a nameless bastard got on some tavern woman in the south. It is, to Cersei, an insult beyond forgiveness. A drunken pledge, yes, but drunken pledges from kings have a way of becoming law if no one strangles them in the cradle. She does not rage where others can see. She simply begins, in the quiet of her own mind, to plan its undoing. Every arrangement can be unmade. Every man can be reached. She files the matter away like a blade laid flat beneath silk, and waits. Ned does not sleep that night. He lies in the dark of his own chambers, turning the thing over as a man turns a stone to see what lives beneath it. Refuse the king, and he insults the crown and draws exactly the attention he fears. Accept, and he pulls Jon toward the south, toward Cersei, toward eyes that might one day see too clearly. Both roads run through danger. There is no safe path, only the least ruinous one. By the gray of first light he has decided. He will agree, but on terms. The betrothal must be long, quiet, whispered rather than proclaimed, kept from the great courts and the small councils until both children come of age. Time, he tells himself, buys distance. Time buys silence. Time may let the king forget, or death may unmake the promise before it ever comes due. He rises to seek Robert. He does not yet know that Cersei has risen first. Consider the shape of a decision once it has been made. It hardens. It becomes not a choice but a fact. And a man who has resolved to walk a difficult road stops asking whether he should and begins asking only how. Ned Stark finds Robert in the guest hall by mid-morning, and he speaks the words he cannot unspeak. He accepts the office of hand. He accepts the burden of the South. And when Robert, delighted, claps him upon the shoulder and speaks again of the marriage between the boy and the princess, Ned does not argue the point. He simply attaches his conditions, like weights, to a fishing line, hoping they sink deep enough to hold. A long betrothal, a quiet one. The king waves them away as trifles, agreeing to everything and remembering nothing, which is precisely what Ned had counted upon. But here, the road forks in a way Ned had not fully reckoned. For a boy betrothed to a princess cannot ride to the wall. The thing is simple once spoken aloud. A man of the Night's Watch takes no wife, holds no lands, fathers no children. Jon cannot wear both futures. And so the arrangement that Ned made to protect his son now reaches back and takes from that same son the one path he had chosen for himself. Jon receives the news in his father's solar, and the war within him is plain upon his face. He had wanted the black. He had wanted the brotherhood, the honor a bastard might earn, where birth mattered less than blade and vigil. He had wanted, most of all, his Uncle Benjen's respect and the cold, clean purpose of the far north. Now another future opens before him, dazzling and strange, a future in which a bastard sits near princes and a Baratheon girl might one day take his hand. Ned does not command him. That is the cruelty and the mercy of it. He reasons. Quietly, patiently, he speaks of the wall as a place of ice and regret, of vows a young man makes in haste and repents at leisure. He does not lie. He simply lets the brighter path shine, and a boy of 14, however solemn, cannot help but turn toward the light. When Jon at last nods, Ned feels no triumph, only the private ache of a man who has steered a child away from one danger and directly into a greater one. If you're enjoying this alternate history of Westeros so far, please consider subscribing, because I upload new stories every single day. Now let's continue with the story. Benjen finds his nephew in the Godswood, beneath the red-leaved heart tree, where the Starks have always gone to speak the truths that will not survive in warmer rooms. He is disappointed. He does not hide it. He had wanted the boy for the watch, had half promised him a place, and now the promise dissolves. But Benjen has ranged beyond the wall and lived, and he understands that the watch is not the only place where men die young. He tells Jon so plainly. The court, he says, is more perilous than any wildling would. Beyond the wall, a man's enemies wear their hatred openly and carry it in their hands. In King's Landing, the knives are dressed in courtesy, and the man who smiles at your table may be the one who has already priced your death. Then he presses a gift into Jon's palm. Not Valyrian steel, for House Stark holds none, but a northern dagger of fine make, its edge honed keen, its grip fitted to a young hand. Steel keeps you alive, Benjen tells him, but judgment keeps you from ever needing to draw it. Learn to read men before you learn to fight them. Jon closes his fingers around the hilt and does not yet understand how often he will remember those words. Elsewhere in the castle, another confrontation runs its course, colder and more bitter. Catelyn corners her husband before his departure, and the grievance she has nursed since the feast now spills into the open. Her sons, her true-born sons, are the future lords of the North, and yet it is the bastard whose fortune now climbs toward a princess, whose name will be spoken in the same breath as royalty. She demands to know why Ned permits it, why he elevates the one child who ought to have remained in shadow, and Ned, who cannot tell her the truth without spreading the very secret that could end them all, gives her nothing. He offers silence where she wants explanation, and silence between spouses is a wound that does not close cleanly. The rift widens. She turns from him, convinced he loves the bastard beyond reason, never guessing that his refusal is itself the deepest proof of how much he fears for them all. The children see it differently, as children do. Arya is delighted, openly, fiercely, thrilled that the brother she loves best has risen so high, and she peppers him with questions about the princess and the South, until he laughs despite himself. Sansa is not delighted. Sansa frets in the way of a girl who has built a castle of dreams, and now watches a stranger lay claim to a corner of it. If a bastard's marriage draws the court's eye, what becomes of her own hoped-for match with the Golden Prince? Every eye turned toward Jon is an eye turned from her. She says nothing of this aloud. She only grows quieter and watchful, and begins, in her own small way, to measure her half-brother as a rival, where once he had been merely beneath her notice. And so two roads open south. Ned begins to make ready. What if a boy raised to expect nothing arrives at the seat of everything? Consider the arithmetic of it. Jon Snow rides through the Lion Gate of King's Landing, neither as a prince nor as a page, neither claimed nor cast off, and the city has no shelf on which to set a thing like him. The court runs on categories. It sorts men into boxes with the precision of a coin counter, and here comes a bastard betrothed to a princess, a creature that fits no box at all. That uncertainty is his danger. It is also, though he does not yet know it, his only weapon. Cersei Lannister understands him at once, because she understands threats the way other people understand weather. She feels them coming in her bones. She receives him in the throne room with a smile that never touches her eyes, and every word she chooses is a blade wrapped in silk. She calls him Lord Stark's natural son, weighting the word natural until it curdles. She arranges his quarters in a distant wing, far from Tommen, far from Joffrey, and above all, far from Myrcella, because proximity breeds affection, and affection breeds legitimacy, and legitimacy is the one thing this match must never be permitted to grow. She is playing a long game. She will void the betrothal in time, she tells herself, patiently, once Robert's enthusiasm cools and some greater matter distracts him. Until then, she will simply ensure the boy never becomes real. A shadow in the corridors, a name unspoken. Jon endures it. This is the thing she does not account for. She has spent her life among men who cannot bear humiliation, who must answer every slight with a slight of their own. And she does not recognize the quality Ned Stark pressed into this boy across 16 winters. Jon bows when he is meant to bow. He accepts the poor rooms without complaint. He stands through her cold receptions with his face composed and his eyes level, and the composure itself becomes an accusation, because a boy who does not flinch cannot be shamed, and a boy who cannot be shamed cannot be diminished. The knights of the Kingsguard notice. Old Sir Barristan Selmy, who has watched a great many high-born sons behave like spoiled children, watches this bastard carry himself like something the North forged in the cold, and says nothing, and remembers. Myrcella finds him in the gardens. She is not supposed to. Her mother has forbidden it in that particular way. Mothers forbid things they fear children will do anyway, and children hear the fear beneath the command and are drawn precisely to it. She is curious. She is kind, in the manner of a girl not yet taught that kindness is a currency to be hoarded. She asks him about the North, about the snows that never melt, about the wolves. He tells her of the dire wolves, of the litter found in the summer snows, of Ghost with his red eyes and his silence, and she leans forward, forgetting to be a princess, becoming only a girl hearing a story. She confesses her fears in return, haltingly. The court frightens her. The whispers frighten her. Her brother frightens her, though she does not say Joffrey's name aloud. And Jon, who knows a great deal about being frightened in halls that do not want you, listens. A friendship forms in that garden, tentative, cautious, real, and every hour of it is a stone laid against Cersei's plan, because you cannot easily void a match between two people who have begun to see each other, and Cersei does not yet know the stones are being laid. Tyrion Lannister knows. Tyrion knows most things, and takes pleasure in the ones his sister would prefer he did not. He seeks the boy out with a cup of wine and an appraising eye, one outsider recognizing another across a crowded room, and he offers Jon the education no maester teaches. Never forget what you are, the dwarf tells him, and the world will never be able to use it against you. He finds the betrothal enormously entertaining. This bastard and this princess, this deliberate insult his sister must smile through. And entertainment is the closest thing Tyrion has to loyalty, which makes him, improbably, an ally. He tells Jon which men to trust and which to fear. He explains the court as a den of lions, and lions, he notes, are only dangerous when you turn your back. Jaime Lannister watches from a distance. He says little, but he marks the way the boy moves through a room, the balance in the shoulders, the wariness that is not fear but readiness, and he thinks, that is not a servant's carriage. That is how a swordsman carries himself. It troubles him in a way he cannot name. He has seen bastards before. He has not seen one who walks as though he expects, someday, to be measured by a blade rather than a name. And so the pieces settle into their positions on the board. Cersei plots patience. Myrcella returns to the garden. Tyrino pours another cup and smiles. Jaime watches. Jon endures. None of them yet know that a raven is already flying south from Winterfell, black wings against a graying sky, and that Ned Stark is riding to answer a summons that will pull every one of these threads taut at once. The letter waits, unopened, on the hand's empty desk. It will not wait long. What if a single book could unravel a dynasty? Not a weapon, not an army, not a whispered conspiracy in a darkened hall, but a book, old and heavy and bound in cracked leather, its pages recording the lineages of the great houses across centuries of marriages and mergers and blood. Ned Stark opens it in the quiet of the Tower of the Hand, and by candlelight he begins to read the names of the Baratheons stretching back into the deep past, and he finds a pattern so consistent it might have been carved in stone. Black hair, black hair, black hair. Generation after generation, the seed of Baratheon stamps itself upon every child it fathers, coal dark and unmistakable, even when the mother is golden as summer wheat. He thinks of Robert's children. He thinks of the three of them, Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen, golden all, Lannister bright, without a single black hair among them. And he thinks of Myrcella most of all, because Myrcella is not merely a princess to Ned Stark. She is the girl his foster son is pledged to wed, the betrothal that seemed a gift, a rope thrown to a bastard drowning in his own low birth, now hangs before Ned like a noose he did not know he was holding. If the suspicion forming in his mind is true, if these children are not Robert's at all, but the fruit of some hidden sin between the queen and her own twin brother, then Myrcella is no Baratheon, no princess by right, a girl born of incest and lies. And Jon, poor Jon, has been chained to that lie by royal decree. Ned closes the book. He does not close his thoughts so easily. He retraces the trail Jon Arryn walked before him. The old hand had visited a smith's shop in the Street of Steel, where a black-haired boy hammered iron with Robert's own square jaw. He had sought out a brothel where an infant girl slept with the king's dark curls upon her head. Jon Arryn had gathered the same evidence, followed the same thread, arrived at the same terrible sum, and Jon Arryn had died. The logic assembles itself with a cold precision Ned finds no comfort in. What if the truth killed the man who found it first? What if the very act of understanding is the danger? He weighs the possibilities the way a man weighs stones in each hand. To expose Cersei is to unmake the queen and every child she has passed off as Robert's heir. It is to shatter the betrothal utterly, to leave Jon suddenly worthless again, a bastard promised to a girl who no longer exists in any legal or noble sense. It is to invite the wrath of Casterly Rock down upon the north. To conceal it is to lie to the king, to betray Robert, his oldest friend, the man who loved his sister and rages still at her memory, and to leave Jon married one day to a lie, tethered to a house whose foundations are rotted through. Ned sits with the impossible arithmetic of it and confides in no one. Not in Jon, certainly not in the queen. He begins, quietly, to consider sending the boy north again, back to Winterfell, back to the cold, clean walls where the game is not played and a man may sleep without counting the knives at his back. He tells himself, it is only prudence. He knows it is more than that. He senses the shape of a storm gathering just beyond the horizon, the pressure of it in the air, and he wants his family clear of the ground it will strike. But Cersei Lannister is not blind. She marks the hand's movements as a lioness marks the shifting grass. She learns of his visits to the smithy, his questions in the low places of the city, and she understands with perfect clarity what he seeks and what he has surely found. The question is no longer whether Ned suspects. The question is what she does before he acts. She chooses a subtle blade. She goes to Robert in his chambers, wine already in his belly, and she plants the seed with a mother's practiced gentleness. The bastard boy, she says. This Snow. Is he truly worthy of a princess of the realm, a girl of royal blood, promised to a base-born son of a fallen enemy? She lets the words settle. She suggests, delicately, that the betrothal might be reconsidered, that better matches await Myrcella, that the North's ambitions grow too bold, that a king should not squander his daughter on the guilt of an old war. And Robert, stubborn and sentimental and half in the cups, does exactly what she does not want. He roars. He slams his goblet down. He tells her the boy has Stark blood, Lyanna's people's blood, and that he will not hear another word against the match. It is done. It is sealed. He made a promise to Ned and to the memory of a woman she could never replace, and by all the gods he will keep it. He reaffirms the betrothal in his fury, unwittingly drawing the threads of Stark and Baratheon tighter still, binding the two houses closer. At the very moment the ground beneath them begins to crack. Cersei withdraws. She smiles as she goes. But behind the smile, the calculation quickens, and she begins to think not of persuasion, but of removal. What if the surest way to break a promise is not to argue against it, but to remove the man who made it? Cersei does not sleep that night. She sits at her window while the castle settles into darkness, and she turns the problem over in her mind, the way a jeweler turns a flawed stone, searching for the fracture line. Robert cannot be reasoned with. She has tried. The boy will marry the girl because a dead woman wished it, and no living voice will change that. So the question narrows, and narrowing sharpens. If the promise cannot be unmade while the king breathes, then the king must stop breathing. It is a simple equation. It is the only equation left. Morning brings the hunt. Robert rides out beneath a gray sky with his beaters and his hounds and his hangers-on, half of them still stinking of last night's wine, and he is loud and cheerful in the way of a man who has spent his anger and forgotten why he was angry at all. He claps Ned upon the shoulder before he goes. He tells him to mind the realm while he is away, to keep the throne warm, to try not to bore himself to death with parchment. Then he is gone through the gates, and the dust settles behind him, and Ned is left alone with the weight of a kingdom and a secret. Consider the position of Eddard Stark in this hour. He knows what Cersei is. He has traced the line of it through a book of lineages and a boy's black hair, and the truth sits in him like a swallowed stone. Joffrey is not Robert's son. None of them are. And yet Ned looks at what the truth will cost, and something in him recoils from the sheer completeness of the ruin. The children are children. Myrcella is betrothed to his own blood. So Ned makes the choice that honorable men make and calculating men never do. He resolves to warn her. He will go to the queen, privately, and tell her that he knows, and give her the chance to flee with her children before he lays the whole of it before the king. Mercy, he calls it. History will call it something else. He summons her to the Godswood. He tells her he knows the truth of Joffrey's parentage. He tells her she should take her children and go, far and fast, before Robert returns from the hunt. Cersei listens. She says almost nothing. She lets him speak, and as she listens, the last piece falls into place with a click she alone can hear. He has warned her. He has, in his honor, handed her the very thing she needed, the certainty that the king already stands upon the edge, and time enough to give him the push. She does not flee. Flight is for those with no better move. She has a better move. When she leaves the Godswood, she is already composing the words she will send to the hunt. Extra wine for the king, a cask of the strong arbor vintage, sent with her love, that his grace might drink deep and hunt merry, and a boar, they say later, that the king's own men had marked as fierce, and a king too drunk to give the beast the respect that a boar demands. These are the pieces. Cersei arranges them and steps back and lets the board play itself. She does not hold the spear. She never needs to hold the spear. Word reaches the Red Keep in the gray of the following evening, carried by a rider whose horse is lathered white. The king is gored. The king is dying. The tusk went in deep, and the wound has gone foul, and the maesters can do nothing but dull the pain and wait. They bring Robert home on a litter, and the great booming man who rode out 3 days before is a ruin of gray flesh and blackening flesh, and a smell that fills the room. Ned kneels beside the bed, and here, at the end, the two threads of this story draw one last knot. Robert, softened by nearness to death, gropes for his old friend's hand. He speaks of the children. Protect them, he says. All of them, whatever comes. He speaks of Lyanna, as he always speaks of Lyanna, when the wine or the pain loosens his tongue. And then he remembers the betrothal, and something like peace crosses the wreckage of his face. Jon and Myrcella, his blood and hers, joined at last, the nearest he will ever come to giving Lyanna the child they never made. Let it stand, he tells Ned. Whatever else you do, let that stand. He calls for parchment. He is too weak to write, so he tells Ned the words, and Ned writes them, and Robert sets his hand to the seal. A decree naming Eddard Stark protector of the realm until Joffrey comes of age. Robert believes he is safeguarding his son. He is signing a warrant for the destruction of the only man who tried to spare his family, the Candle Gutters. Robert's breathing grows shallow, and in her own chambers, 3 floors above, Cersei reads the report of the decree with a stillness that is not surprise. She had expected this. She had planned for this. Joffrey will sit the Iron Throne within the day, and the paper in Ned Stark's hand will be worth less than the wax that sealed it. She summons her brother. She begins to give her orders. What if the woman who tore that decree apart understood, better than anyone in the realm, that a piece of parchment is only as strong as the swords standing behind it? Cersei holds the document in her hands the following morning, in the pale hour when Robert's body has not yet cooled, and she does not rage. She reads, she weighs, and then, with a deliberateness that is almost gentle, she folds the paper and tears it again, and lets the pieces fall, like the first snow of a winter no one in this southern heat can imagine. "My son is king," she says. The words are quiet. They do not need to be loud. In this room, in this moment, they are simply true. Ned Stark had known this would come. Not the shape of it, perhaps, but the direction. He is a man who has learned to distrust the smiling promises of the capital, and he has spent his weeks in this city, pulling at loose threads until the whole tapestry began to fray. The children are not Robert's. He is certain of it now, and so he has taken a precaution that seems, on its surface, entirely innocent. He has drawn Myrcella close. His son's betrothed, he tells the household, deserves the protection of her future family. Who could object? The girl herself is glad of it, for she likes Jon, likes his quiet and his kindness, and she has no notion that she has become something else. A piece on the board, leverage that Ned prays he will never have to use. He has made his arrangement with Petyr Baelish. This is his error, and it is an old one, worn smooth by every telling. Littlefinger promises the gold cloaks. Littlefinger promises the city watch will stand with Stark when the moment comes to seize the young queen and her children and hold the throne until the truth can be spoken aloud. Ned does not trust him, but he needs him, and need has a way of dulling a man's suspicions until they cannot cut. Consider the arithmetic. Ned brings his household guard. Baelish brings the watch. Together they hold the keep. Alone, Ned holds nothing but the length of his own reach. He does not finish the calculation. He does not need to. The throne room. Ned stands before the assembled court and speaks Robert's true words, and Cersei answers with a smile, and the coins are counted in the eyes of every gold cloak who now turns his spear inward. Baelish steps close behind him. "I did warn you," he murmurs, almost apologetic, almost tender, "not to trust me." A blade at Ned's throat. The Stark men die where they stand, cut down in the space of a dozen heartbeats, their blood running dark across the stone that has drunk so much before it. Ned is seized. His arms are wrenched behind him, and in the chaos, in the shouting and the ringing steel, he finds one thing left to do with the last freedom of his voice. "Jon," he says, "get the girl out." Jon Snow had been standing at the chamber's edge, half forgotten, a bastard of the North, with no place at the center of a southern tragedy. But he is close to the royal children, as he has been since the betrothal made him something more than a stranger to Myrcella. He does not hesitate. He has never learned the courtier's art of hesitation. He takes the girl's hand, and he pulls her back through the servants' passage, and behind them, the doors of the throne room boom, shut on his father's ruin. He is not alone in this. Tyrion Lannister, who owes the boy nothing, and yet finds himself unwilling to see a child fed to his sister's ambitions, has pressed a purse of coin into Jon's hand days before, a hedge against a wager he could not name. And a Stark guardsman, one of the few who slipped the slaughter, falls in beside them in the dark of the passage, sword still wet. The three of them move, down and down, through the bowels of the keep, where the torches burn low and the guards have thinned because every spear has been called to the throne room above. Myrcella is weeping. She does not understand. "Why must we run?" she asks. And Jon has no answer that will not break her further, so he gives her the only thing he has, which is his hand and his silence and the promise in the set of his jaw that he will not let go. He wraps her in a serving girl's plain wool. He smudges her golden hair with ash from a cold hearth. A princess becomes a nothing, a nobody, a small pale shape hurrying beside a bastard and a bleeding man through the gates of the city that is already beginning to close. The coin buys them a gap in the watch. The guardsman's sword buys them the rest. And then they are through, out into the reeking press of Flea Bottom, and the Red Keep rises behind them, And somewhere in its high, cold chambers, Cersei is learning that the girl is gone. She will not weep. She will calculate. She will send riders. She will tighten every fist she owns around this city until it screams. Jon does not look back. He cannot. He has become, in the space of a single morning, a fugitive with a princess in his charge, and the road ahead of him is longer than he can yet see. What if a fugitive, given every road in the Seven Kingdoms, chose the one that led toward the sister of his father's enemy? Consider the logic. Cold and clear as the mountain air they will soon climb. The north is Jon's blood, but the north is watched. The King's Road garrisoned. The gates of every holdfast now closed against a bastard and a golden girl. Dorne is far and uncertain. Highgarden a den of ambition. The Stormlands crawling with Baratheon claimants sharpening their knives. But the Vale is a fortress the gods themselves seem to have built. Its passes narrow, its bloody gate impassable. Its lady, the sister of the woman who raised Jon in all but name. Lysa Arryn is Catelyn's blood. Lysa Arryn has no love for Lannisters. And so the calculation resolves itself into a single word, a single direction, a single fragile hope, and they turn their tired horses east. They ride at night and hide by day. Jon has learned this trade in fragments, from Benjen's stories, from the ranging talk of the Night's Watch men who passed through Winterfell, and he applies it now with the desperate precision of a man who knows a single error will cost the girl beside him her life. He keeps to the tree lines. He waters the horses before dawn. He counts the coin in his pouch and counts it again, and knows it will not last. And beside him rides Myrcella, saying nothing for the first day, saying little for the second, until on the third night, with the campfire banked low and the stars vast and indifferent above them, she speaks the thing she has been carrying like a stone in her chest. She believes her mother killed her father. She says it plainly, the way a child says a thing too large to soften. She has watched Cersei her whole life. She has learned to read the small tightenings at the corners of that beautiful mouth, the way certain names make her mother's hands go still, and she has concluded, with a clarity that frightens her, that the boar was not simply a boar, that the wine that made her father slow and clumsy in the hunt did not fill his cup by accident. And Joffrey, she says her brother's name and shivers, and it is not the cold. She has seen what Joffrey does to things smaller than himself. She has seen the birds, the cats, the servant boy who limped afterward and then was gone. And so she has made a choice, and she tells Jon this too, that she would rather ride into the wild with a stark bastard she has known for the span of a single moon than remain within reach of her own blood. Jon does not answer at once. He does not need to. He only tightens the blanket around her shoulders, and in that small gesture is a promise more binding than any oath sworn before a heart tree. And while they ride, far behind them in the reeking heat of King's Landing, another calculation is failing. Consider the mechanism Cersei built. Ned Stark, defeated, imprisoned, is to be spared. His life traded for a confession, his honor sacrificed to save his daughters, to spare the realm a war, to let the lie of Joffrey's blood stand unchallenged. It is an elegant machine, and it requires only two things to function. It requires Ned to break, and it requires leverage, hostages, blood in Cersei's fist to press against the North's throat. But one of those hostages is gone. Myrcella has vanished into the countryside with a wolf's bastard, and with her has vanished a portion of the Queen's certainty, a portion of her calm. So Ned climbs the steps of Baelor's sept. He has agreed to name himself traitor, to swallow the lie, to trade truth for his children's breath. And the machine should hold. The machine is designed to hold. But there is a piece on this board that answers to no design, a piece that no one, not Cersei, not Varys, not the calculating Littlefinger, can fully control. Joffrey, the boy on the throne, enraged that his betrothed's family has slipped his grasp, humiliated, unrestrained by any hand strong enough to check him, he hears the confession. He does not want mercy, he wants a head, and so, in a single reckless syllable that undoes months of patient scheming, he calls for the sword. Sansa screams. Arya, somewhere in the crush of the crowd, is pulled down and away and vanishes like water into sand. And Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, Warden of the North, dies on the steps of the Sept, and the machine that was meant to prevent a war becomes instead its opening move. The news travels north on the wings that all terrible news seems to grow. It reaches Winterfell in the hands of a rider whose horse is near dead beneath him. Robb Stark reads it and does not weep. Not yet, because there is no time for weeping in a boy who has just become a lord at war. He calls his banners, and Catelyn, grief carving her hollow, learns two things in the same breaking hour: that her husband is dead, and that the boy she never loved, the bastard she wished gone from her hall, now rides through the wilderness with a Lannister princess sheltered beneath his cloak. She does not know whether to curse him or bless him. She knows only that the war has begun, and its shape is already wrong. What if a single betrothal, sealed years ago in a fit of royal sentiment, had become the most valuable piece on a board no one yet understood? Robb Stark does not know it, not fully, as he rides south with the North at his back and vengeance in his chest. He knows only the arithmetic of grief translated into war. 20,000 swords, the twins to cross, the Kingslayer to unhorse, and somewhere in the vast unmapped dark to the south of the neck, a half-brother whose position, quite suddenly, has become the strangest and most useful thing in all the realm. The northern lords crown him in a hall thick with smoke and fury. They lift their blades and call him king in the north, and Robb accepts because a boy who has lost his father cannot afford to refuse the men who would die for him. But when the shouting fades, when the ale settles and the fires burn low, it is his mother who speaks the thing the lords have not considered. Jon has the girl, Jon has Myrcella, and a Lannister princess held by a Stark is not a hostage. It is a hinge upon which an entire war might swing. So Robb sends riders, quiet ones, chosen for their loyalty rather than their swords, dispatched along every road that leads toward the Eyrie and the Vale and the passes between. Find them. Find my brother and the princess he guards. Bring them into our keeping. He does not say why, not aloud, but Catelyn understands the calculation as clearly as if it had been drawn on parchment. A daughter of Cersei Lannister is worth more than 100 lords of the Westerlands. She is a chip that might buy back Sansa. She is leverage against the Iron Throne itself. And Jon, unknowing, carries her through the wilderness like a man carrying a lit torch through a room full of oil. Meanwhile, the truth spreads. This is the part the players in King's Landing did not anticipate, the variable that Ned Stark's early investigation seeded into the soil months before his death. Stannis Baratheon, hard as an anvil and just as warm, declares what Ned had discovered and died to prove, that Joffrey is no son of Robert, that Tommen is no son of Robert, that Myrcella, the Golden Princess promised to a bastard of Winterfell, is herself a bastard, born of a sister and a brother. Stannis sends his letters to every keep in the Seven Kingdoms, and the word travels faster than any word of its kind ever has, because Ned's inquiries had already loosened the stones that held the lie in place. Consider the position this creates. Jon is bound by Robert's decree to marry Myrcella. The dead king's will, spoken in a hall full of witnesses, still holds its weight upon him. And yet the girl he is sworn to wed has become, in the space of a single proclamation, a disputed heir whose legitimacy is denied by one claimant and asserted by none. She is nothing. She is everything. She is a child with no crown, and yet a child whose very body might decide whether the Lannisters keep their grip upon the throne. To hold her is to hold a question the whole realm is asking, and Jon holds her still, wrapped in his cloak, riding toward the one refuge he believes might take them. The Eyrie greets them with madness. Lysa Arryn, sister to Catelyn, cousin by blood to the boy who now shelters at her gate, has curdled into something suspicious and small. She clutches her sickly son and sees enemies in every shadow, and when Jon arrives with a Lannister girl in tow, she cannot decide whether he brings her salvation or ruin. Hand them to Cersei, one voice whispers in the fevered corridors of her mind. Buy the queen's favor, buy safety for the Vale. And Jon, exhausted, half-frozen, still a boy beneath the weight of a man's burden, must argue for both their lives before a woman whose reason has abandoned her. He does not argue with threats. He has none. He argues instead with the thing his father taught him without ever meaning to: honor as a form of strategy. If the Vale surrenders a princess entrusted to a Stark by the dead king himself, what lord will ever trust the Vale again? If Lysa hands them to the Lannisters, she binds herself to the losing side of a lie that Stannis has already exposed. Jon speaks slowly, carefully, and the Vale lords listen, because a boy who guards a princess out of duty is a boy worth listening to. Enough of them side with him. Enough of them lean upon Lysa's madness until it bends away from betrayal. They stay. For now, they stay. And then the news of Ned's death climbs the mountain roads and reaches him in the high, cold halls, carried by a rider who cannot meet his eyes. Jon reads it. He does not weep, not at first, because the grief is too vast to fit inside a single moment. He simply sits, the parchment loose in his fingers, Myrcella watching him from across the room with the wide eyes of a child who understands that something has broken. And in that silence, the boy makes a decision that will define everything to come. Protecting her is no longer a promise to a dead king. It is the only purpose he has left. What if a battle fought far from the mountains could still reach up and change the fate of a boy and a girl hiding in the cold? What if the smoke rising over a distant bay determined whether they lived free or died as bargaining pieces? On the black waters below King's Landing, the answer is being written in green fire. Stannis Baratheon comes with the certainty of a man who believes the throne is his, by law, by right, by the simple arithmetic of succession. His ships crowd the Blackwater rush. His men press toward the walls. And for a single held breath, it seems the city will fall, that Cersei's grip on the regency will shatter against the rocks like the hulls of the vessels she cannot save. But Tyrion Lannister has prepared a different arithmetic. Wildfire, A single chain drawn taut across the mouth of the river. A trap sprung at the precise moment when the enemy fleet is most committed and least able to retreat. The water burns. The sky burns. Men burn with it. And then, when Stannis has thrown his last strength against the gates, the Tyrell host arrives beneath the Lannister banners, and the assault breaks. The city holds. The Regency survives. But survival is not the same as strength, and Cersei knows this better than anyone. She sits in the aftermath, in a solar heavy with the smell of smoke that has drifted in from the ruined bay, and she counts what she has left. A wounded crown, a son on a throne no one truly respects, an alliance with the Tyrells purchased at a price she has not yet fully paid, and a daughter, missing, unaccounted for, somewhere beyond her reach. Myrcella is not merely a child to Cersei. Myrcella is legitimacy. A princess restored is proof that the crown endures, proof that House Lannister still holds all its pieces on the board. So she sends hunters, Sir Balon Swan, and men who ask no questions, riding out to find the girl who vanished into the wars. But Cersei has learned that leverage cuts both ways. She holds Sansa Stark, and so word travels north and east, carried by careful messengers, that the Queen Regent will guarantee the safety of one Stark girl in exchange for the return of one Baratheon princess. A clean trade, a mother's daughter for a captor's captive. The message reaches the Vale. It reaches Jon. Myrcella hears it too, because she is old enough now to insist on hearing things, and she does not flinch. She offers herself before Jon can even shape his refusal. She will go back. She will let Cersei have her, if it means Sansa is spared, because she has learned in these long months that a person is measured by what they are willing to surrender. Jon looks at her for a long moment. He understands the courage of it. He also understands what she does not fully grasp, that a mother who murders a king does not honor bargains, that Sansa's safety promised is not Sansa's safety delivered, that handing Myrcella into that court is handing her into the hands of the people who tore his family apart. He does not finish the sentence he begins. He does not need to. No, he tells her, not to her, not to the woman who did this. And then he offers something else, a bolder path, spoken quietly in the cold hall, while the wind presses against the shutters. If the crown cannot be trusted, and the Vale cannot be relied upon, then they must find a shelter strong enough to defy both. Highgarden, the Tyrells, the richest, greenest, most populous power in the realm, and the very allies who have just saved King's Landing from ruin. If the Tyrells now hold Cersei's leash, then the Tyrells are the ones who can dictate the terms of Myrcella's future, and a princess betrothed to a Stark, sheltered under the roses of the Reach, becomes something no single faction can simply seize. She becomes a piece too valuable to sacrifice. It is a gamble, built on the logic of the board. Move toward the strongest player. Make yourself useful to the people who can no longer afford to lose. Far to the south, in the smoke-stained city, another mind is turning the same pieces. Tyrion Lannister has learned, through the quiet channels only he seems to command, that Jon Snow holds Myrcella, and Tyrion, who thinks in decades where others think in seasons, sees not a scandal, but an opportunity, a marriage, a living thread that ties Stark to Baratheon to Lannister, a knot that binds rather than divides. The war is exhausting everyone. The treasuries are bleeding, and a boy who keeps a princess safe rather than ransoming or killing her is a boy who might one day be a bridge instead of an enemy. So Tyrion sends word, coded, careful, deniable. A message that does not command and does not threaten. It suggests, it says, in words that mean more than they appear to, that if Jon can keep Myrcella alive and unharmed until the fires of this war burn low, then House Lannister's own factions, weary, pragmatic, tired of bleeding, may come to prefer the match to endless slaughter. Jon reads the message twice. He does not yet know whether it is a lifeline or a lure. He folds it. He looks toward Myrcella, and he begins, slowly, to plan the road south. Far to the south of Jon's quiet planning, a different road bends toward a different crossing, and upon that crossing hangs everything. The twins, two towers joined by a bridge over the Green Fork, and beneath them, the only passage that can carry an army north in time to matter. Robb Stark needs that bridge. He has always needed it. And the man who holds it, Walder Frey, is old and vain and vengeful, and he remembers a promise broken, a betrothal pledged and then abandoned, when a king chose love over strategy. In the world that might have been, this is where the trap closes. This is where the wine flows red, and then redder still, where music masks the drawing of knives, where a mother watches her son die, and the North's rebellion dies with him. That was the design. That was the price of the broken word. But consider what has changed. Consider the single altered thread that now runs through every calculation on the board. Jon Snow holds Myrcella Baratheon, and that fact, small as it seems in the great ledger of the war, has rewritten the arithmetic of betrayal. Walder Frey is many things, but he is not a fool about power. He understands that a man who slaughters his guests must be certain, absolutely certain, of which way the wind will finally blow, because the only thing more dangerous than defying the winning side is guessing wrong about who the winning side will be. And now no one can guess. The Lannisters hold the Iron Throne, yes, but they do not hold Myrcella. A bastard of Winterfell holds her, unharmed, and around that fact, 100 quiet possibilities have begun to gather, like crows on a fence line. Whichever faction controls the boy and the princess may control the succession itself. Walder does not know who that will be, and a man who does not know does not commit to a massacre. So the old lord receives Robb Stark in his cold hall, and he grumbles, and he insults, and he lists his grievances with the practiced venom of a man who has nursed them for years. But he does not close the trap. He cannot afford to. To murder the young wolf now would be to throw away every option he holds, to bind House Frey to a single outcome in a war that has suddenly grown too many outcomes. And Walder Frey has built his whole long life on keeping his options open. Roose Bolton feels the same shifting ground beneath his careful feet. He had listened to the Lannister offer, Warden of the North, gold, a lordship built on the bones of his liege. He had nearly said yes, but Bolton is a man who reads the board coldly, and the board has changed. A clean Lannister victory is no longer certain, and a betrayal that binds him to an uncertain victor is a betrayal that may leave him exposed and hated with nothing to show for it. So Bolton hesitates. He counsels patience. He speaks of waiting to see how the matter of the princess resolves. And in that hesitation, the planned slaughter loses its momentum, delayed by a single day and then another, each delay softening the edge of the blade. Robb does not know all of this, but he knows enough. A Frey man, one of Walder's countless grandsons, disgusted by the whispers he has heard in the servants' corridors, slips word to a Stark captain, word of hidden men, of crossbows waiting, of a signal that never quite comes. Robb hears it and goes still. He says nothing to his mother, not yet, but he doubles the guard he trusts. He keeps his sword near. He watches the musicians in the gallery with the eyes of a man who has learned that music can be a shroud. The feast unfolds beneath that watchfulness. Wine is poured, and Robb drinks little of it. Toasts are made, and Robb marks who does not meet his eyes. Catelyn sits beside him, and she too feels the wrongness in the air, the way tension coils beneath the celebration, like a snake beneath warm stones. But the killing does not come. The moment for it passes, and then another passes, because Walder Frey, watching from his high seat, keeps deciding that the risk is not yet worth the reward. What Robb secures at the Twins is not victory, it is survival, which in this war has become its own kind of triumph. He gives hostages, men of the North he can ill afford to lose, oaths he does not fully intend to keep, promises of marriage and gold and future favor. He purchases his passage in the currency of humiliation and debt, but he purchases it. The bridge opens. The northern host crosses the Green Fork with its king alive and its cause battered but breathing. And Catelyn Stark lives. She rides north beside her son, weary and grieved and uncertain, but alive. And because she lives, the counsel she carries, the memory she holds, the fierce protective instinct of a mother who has already lost too much, remains upon the board. Robb does not yet understand fully why the trap failed to spring. He knows only that it did, that some invisible weight tilted the scales in his favor when he most needed it. As his host winds north into the failing light, he turns the question over, and somewhere in the turning, unbidden, comes the thought of his half-brother, and of the girl Jon shelters, and of how a single unbroken promise in the North might have bought them all this fragile, precious time. What if the most powerful play in a war of swords was not a sword at all, but a girl? Consider the ledger as it stood, a dead king's whim, spoken in wine, and half forgotten by every man who heard it, had become a living contract, carried on horseback through a war-torn realm. Jon Snow and Myrcella Baratheon rode south into the Reach, into the green and golden heart of Westeros, where the fields lay heavy with the last of the harvest, and the roads ran wide and unhurried beneath a milder sun. And in the great house of Highgarden, an old woman was already calculating what such a girl was worth. Olenna Tyrell had outlived husbands and fools and kings, and she had learned the single truth that governs all games of power. Every piece has a value. The trick is knowing it before your opponent does. When word reached her that Robert Baratheon's daughter had come to her gate, not Cersei's daughter, not the Lannister queen's ward, but a girl betrothed by the dead king's own hand to a son of Winterfell, she understood immediately what fortune had set upon her doorstep. She did not hurry to the hall. She let them wait. Let the bastard and the princess sit in her solar with the smell of roses drifting through the windows, while she decided how she wished to appear. Mace Tyrell wanted to feast them at once. Olenna wanted to interrogate them first. She receives Jon Snow alone, or nearly so, with only her guards arranged like ornaments along the walls. She looks at him the way a merchant looks at a coin she suspects may be counterfeit, and she asks him questions, not the questions of a hostess, but the questions of a general. Who commands your loyalty, boy? Not your king brother in the north. Not the memory of a dead father you never truly served. Her, the girl. Where does your loyalty end and your ambition begin? Jon answers plainly, and this is the thing that unsettles her, because she has spent a lifetime among liars, and she has grown accustomed to the texture of deceit. His honesty has no seams. He tells her he made a vow. He tells her he keeps his vows because they are all he was ever given, that no one could take from him. He does not speak of thrones. He does not speak of crowns. He speaks of a girl whose safety he has carried across a continent, and Olenna Tyrell, who trusts nothing, finds herself trusting this. She sees the shape of it then, all of it, laid out before her like a map. The north is at war with the crown. The Stormlands mourn a dead king and doubt his golden-haired heirs. The Reach feeds the realm and hungers for a place at the highest table. And here, in her solar, sits the living thread that could sew all three together. A Baratheon princess, whose legitimacy no man could question, bound by royal decree to a Stark, sheltered by a Tyrell. Honor the betrothal, and Highgarden becomes the maker of a marriage that unites three great powers against the Lannisters. Break it, and lose the only card in the game that Cersei cannot simply purchase or poison. Olenna does not deliberate long. She agrees to shelter them, under heavy guard, as much prisoner as guest, though she is far too clever to call it either. The distinction, she knows, is only ever a matter of who holds the key. But it is the girl who turns whim into fact. Myrcella Baratheon has changed. The frightened child who fled King's Landing has grown into something harder and finer in the crucible of the road. She has watched men die for her. She has learned the weight of her own name, and standing before the assembled court of Highgarden, before Mace and Olenna and the Flower of the Reach, she does something no one has instructed her to do. She speaks for herself. She names Jon Snow her protector. She names him, before witnesses too numerous to silence, her betrothed and her future husband. And then she goes further. She renounces her mother's authority over her person, declares that Cersei Lannister no longer speaks in her name, nor holds her wardship, and binds herself instead to the promise a dead king made. The hall goes very quiet, because everyone present understands what has just occurred. A drunken jest, spoken years ago and buried under blood and forgetting, has been resurrected by the very person it concerned and made into law by her own tongue. Cersei cannot unmake it. The crown cannot deny it without denying Robert's own word. And Highgarden now holds, in the flesh of a single willful girl, a claim that binds the war's alliances into a shape no one had drawn before. Olenna watches the princess speak, and beneath the practiced disdain of her old face, something almost like admiration flickers and is gone. The pieces have moved, not by her hand, by the girl's own choosing. And as the court murmurs, and Mace beams at his sudden good fortune, and Jon stands rigid beside the princess he swore to protect, Olenna Tyrell begins already to think 3 moves ahead. To King's Landing, where a queen will learn her daughter has slipped the leash. To the north, where a young king wages a war he might yet win with the right allies. And to the wedding she must now arrange, a wedding that will not join 2 houses, but 4. What if a single cup of wine could unmake a dynasty? Consider the mechanics of it. A king sits at his own wedding feast, wine before him, the realm arranged in careful hierarchy around his table, the crown secure, the succession assured. the war a matter of time, and gold rather than survival. And then he drinks, and then he cannot breathe. And then the thing that seemed permanent proves to have been balanced on a single throat all along. Joffrey dies, as such kings die, choking, purpling, clawing at his own neck, while his mother screams, and the court freezes, and the pieces that had seemed so fixed suddenly scatter across the board. It is the same death in this telling as in others. The poison, the wedding, the boy who tormented everyone finally silenced by the one voice no threat could answer. But the consequences move differently now, because the board itself has changed. Cersei knows immediately whom to blame. She always does. Her finger finds Tyrion before her son has finished dying, and the accusation forms on her lips with the ease of long practice, of years spent hating her brother for the crime of their mother's death. Seize him, bind him, try him. The old pattern reasserts itself with the force of inevitability, and for a moment, it seems the story will run its familiar course. The imp in chains, the queen's vengeance, the trial that was never meant to acquit. But here, the divergence tells. Here, the small choices made years ago begin to compound. Because Myrcella is gone, not merely absent, gone beyond recall, seated in Highgarden under Tyrell protection, betrothed by Robert's own dead word to the Stark boy who commands the North. Cersei's daughter, who might once have been a bargaining piece, a hostage to fortune, a thread the queen could pull. That thread now runs to Highgarden and Winterfell both, and it does not answer to a mother's grief. The crown has lost its unassailable heir. Joffrey is dead, and the next Lannister king is a soft boy of 8 who has never wanted the throne and never will. Weigh what remains to Cersei: a dead son, a child king, a regency she must hold with hands already shaking, and a daughter who by law and by the girl's own defiant tongue now belongs to the very alliance arrayed against her house. The crown's grip does not fail all at once. It fails the way a rope fails, one strand, then another, then the whole thing giving way faster than anyone can catch it. Tyrion faces his trial, but the court that gathers to condemn him is not the court that condemned him before. Jaime sees it clearly, in the cold way that men see things when they have finally begun to reckon consequence. His brother, dead, buys nothing. His brother, alive and clever and bound by gratitude, might buy the one thing the Lannisters have run short of: stability. And the Tyrells, who have wagered everything on Myrcella's claim, calculate the same sum and arrive at the same figure. A dead Tyrion is a martyr and a scandal. A living Tyrion is a negotiator. The distance between those two men is the distance between more war and its ending. Quiet at first, then unmistakable. Jaime moves, the Tyrells move, and Cersei, screaming for a head, finds that the court no longer moves with her. Tyrion survives. He flees, as he was always going to flee, across water and into exile. But he flees alive, and that changes everything that follows. Because Tyrion in exile is not Tyrion in a grave. He is a mind at liberty, a voice great houses will still take, a Lannister who owes the Tyrells and the Starks his life, and who understands, as few living men do, exactly how the pieces now stand. From that exile he begins to broker, not openly, never openly, through letters and intermediaries and the slow, patient arithmetic of men who have grown tired of dying, and the shape he draws is the shape the girl herself drew when she spoke at Highgarden. Recognize Myrcella's claim. Honor the betrothal. Let the dead king's final word become the settlement no living faction can quite refuse. And in that shape, Cersei has no place. Cersei is the discredited past, the mother who lost the son and could not hold the daughter and screamed while the realm slipped through her fingers. Tommen sits the throne, a small king under a failing regent, and the great lords look at that arrangement and understand it cannot last. The war grinds on. Armies still march, castles still fall, men still die for causes their grandfathers began. But something has shifted in the calculation of the powerful. They are no longer searching for the next victory. They are searching for the last one, for an ending that does not simply reset the board for another generation's blood. And there, in the quiet corners of great halls, the whispers begin. In the north, where Robb Stark wages his war with the Tyrells now bound to his cause by a wedding no one planned. In the Reach, where Olenna thinks her 3 moves ahead and finds them all leading to the same crossing. In the Stormlands, in the Riverlands, wherever men gather to speak of how this might finally end. The girl beyond the Lannisters' reach, the Stark boy she is promised to, the dead king's decree that no one can lawfully deny. They begin, very carefully, to ask a question none had thought to ask before. What if the answer had been sitting in Robert's drunken jest the whole time? What if a jest could end a war? Not a battle, not a siege, but the whole grinding machine of it. What if the thing that saved the realm was not the finest sword or the sharpest mind, but a dead king's sentimental whim, remembered at the precise moment the powerful had exhausted every other option? They gather at Harrenhal, because Harrenhal has always been where the great and terrible things of the realm are decided, and because its ruined halls belong to no one, and therefore to everyone, Tyrell and Stark, Martell and Arryn, and Jaime Lannister riding beneath a banner that no longer means what it once meant, carrying with him the moderates of his house, the ones who understood, before the others did, that a Lannister sitting the Iron Throne was a Lannister with a target painted across his chest. The lords assemble not as conquerors but as accountants. They are tallying losses. They are seeking the arrangement that costs the least going forward. And they have learned the hard lesson that costs are not measured in a single season, but across generations. Consider the problem as they see it. Any king crowned by force must defend that crown by force, forever, against every lord who calculates that another turn of the wheel might place his own house higher. But a king made by law, by the last binding word of the last man everyone had agreed to obey, is a king no one need feel dishonored in serving. And Robert, drunk and sentimental and reaching for a bond he thought would please a friend, had spoken exactly such a word. He had promised his daughter to Ned Stark's son. He had done it before witnesses. He had done it as king. Olenna Tyrell puts it most plainly, in that dry voice that cuts through the smoke of the great hall. The betrothal is not merely convenient, she observes. It is the only knot that ties every faction together without leaving one house triumphant and the rest resentful. Myrcella carries the Baratheon claim and the softened Lannister blood, the acceptable remainder of a house they cannot simply erase. Jon carries the North and the honor of Eddard Stark, whose name still means something even now. Marry the two, and the Reach has cause to bend. The Vale has cause to bend. The Stormlands have their true heir, and the Lannisters who chose Jaime's road are spared the block. Every piece finds its square. The board, for once, resolves. So they agree, not to crown a boy because a dead man wished it, but because the dead man's wish happened to be the single arrangement that let them all lay down their swords without laying down their pride. And then the secret comes. Ned Stark had carried it into a southern grave, but a secret so heavy does not stay buried when the men who might use it come sniffing. The truth arrives the way such truths always do, through a servant, a maester, a letter that should have burned and did not. Jon is not Ned's bastard. Jon is the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. Born of a marriage or a stealing, it hardly matters which, for the blood is the same. And the blood, spoken aloud in that ruined hall, changes everything. Because now Jon does not need Myrcella. Now Jon does not need Robert's jest, or the Lord's bargain, or the careful arithmetic of exhausted houses. Now Jon has the one thing that trumps all law and all betrothal. He has the throne by right of birth. And half the men in that hall, the moment they understand it, begin to calculate anew. For a true dragon on the throne is a cause worth another war, and men who have bled for less will always find reasons to bleed for more. The realm stands, in that instant, on the edge of the same cliff it has been climbing back down for years. And Jon refuses. He does not shout it. He does not make a speech. He looks at the men who would crown him by blood, and he sees clearly what they cannot see, or will not, that a throne taken by right of birth is still a throne taken, and that another war fought for his name would fill the same graves his father's generation had filled, and their fathers before them. Robert's wish was a jest, but the peace it purchased was not. He honors the dead king, who was not his kin and never knew it. He chooses the bargain over the birthright. He chooses Myrcella. They wed in the great sept of Baelor, where kings have wed before them, beneath the 7 crystals that scatter the light. A boy who might have been a dragon and a girl who might have been a hostage joined instead as the seam that holds a torn kingdom together. The North remains under Robb, warden, and kin to the new king, his loyalty bought not by conquest but by blood already shared. Cersei is confined, her crimes too many to pardon and too dangerous to leave loose. Tyrion returns to the hand's chain, the clever brother who always understood that survival was cleverer than glory. And the realm, which had bled through so many springs, settles at last beneath 2 young rulers whose union began as a drunkard's fond idea and became, against every likelihood, the thing that healed a broken world. The wheel had stopped, and it had stopped because, for once, no one had tried to be its master. And this brings us to the end of this alternate history. If you enjoyed exploring how events might have unfolded differently, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. We dive into new stories from the world of Westeros every single day, imagining the choices, battles, alliances, and destinies that could have completely changed the fate of the 7 kingdoms. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. What do you think would have happened next? Did this version of history end better than the original, or would you have taken the story in a completely different direction? Leave your ideas in the comments, because many of the best future stories come directly from your suggestions. Thank you so much for watching and for spending your time with me. I'll see you tomorrow with another alternate history from Westeros. Until then, peace out.